We ready, Amy?
Yeah.
What's up, y'all? It's Monday, and not just any Monday. It's Marvelous Monday. Thank you, Kettle One, Another Round, Another Rally, and Portland Cocktail Week for having us again. My name is Fanny Chu, and this is my marvelous co-host, the one and only Amy Ward.
Thank you so much, Fanny. Super excited. Today we are talking marvelous modern classic cocktails with two highly regarded bartending veterans, both who have been named Bartender of the Year and earned a multitude of awards over their decorated careers, and are no stranger to instituting classics for our industry. First up, he's my Chicago neighbor, owner of a ready-to-drink cocktail company, the only American to win Diageo World Class Bartender of the Year, a diehard Antiques Roadshow enthusiast, and father to the ridiculously adorable Jackson the Pup, Mr. Charles Joly. Next, coming to us from Las Vegas by way of New York, the Bronx, and Puerto Rico, this man has operated a multitude of world-renowned bar programs, is an avid runner, leader of the group Petty Bartenders for the ethical use of pumpkin spice flavoring, and also dog dad to a puppy that often attends my workout classes, Ahsoka. Thank you, Charles and Giuseppe, for being here. Very excited to talk modern classic cocktails with you all. So why don't you take it away?
Yeah, thanks for having us. I appreciate it. Giuseppe, not so much, but everyone else.
We spent more time together the last 2 days than I think we have in like a decade. Where I'm like, oh wow, Charles, let me call you real quick. Hey, okay, bye.
Yeah, we have. So yeah, thanks so much for having us. I guess I'll kick it off, and then Joey Skywalker, just jump in and give me a wave or a cup of kettle or whatever else you got going on over there. But yeah, so we're going to talk about modern classics in today's session, and basically how they get there. How does a classic cocktail get made? I think it's not high on my bucket list to be like, I need to have these cocktails that will be my legacy and people will make them 100 years from now. But it'd be pretty cool. And I think as bartenders, we've often wondered, how do these cocktails get kind of set in stone and become the icons that people know all over the world? And I think there's a lot of paths to that. But I think we should it's a good idea to start with looking at what the classics are now. Like when we came into the game, like what were the classic cocktails that existed, and how did they get there in the first golden age of the cocktail? You're looking at the late 1800s into the turn of the century, that area that was just where it was bustling prior to everything getting shut down in the U.S. Similar, it's just like now. It's kind of similar to today. So who knows what's gonna happen on the back end of this? The third golden age is going to happen, and another Star Wars movie. So, Giuseppe, what do you think on the classics, like the classics that you grew up with, the first drinks that you learned? I'm not talking about Harvey Wallbangers. I'm like the classics when you actually got into a serious hustle as a cocktail bartender and started to learn your drinks. Like, what were some of the first drinks that you learned that were like true classics, old school classics?
I mean, the first one that comes to mind, I think for every bartender, I mean, especially when you started. I mean, like now, I think we fuck around with each other where it's just like, oh, you know what I mean? The test drink is a daiquiri. I think for all of us, it was the Cosmopolitan. You know what I mean? Just like, like which vodka are you using? Do you use Cointreau triple sec? I mean, like every guest or bartender had an opinion on just the level of pink that it should be, orange zest or like, or lime. And even now, I think we still have these debates about that cocktail, but that one was the one to me where it's like, oh wow, like one, I knew I had to learn it, and I didn't know anything about the history of it, and I thought it was a very old drink. I didn't realize it had only been around for like maybe a decade, less than a decade, and it just became super popular. I mean, there would be nights where, I've worked in bars where we had like Cosmo menus, just like, oh, you can have the mango Cosmo, and you can have the basil Cosmo, and you can have our Cosmo, frozen, and that's because it's a really good drink. It's easy to make. I mean, it's a ton of stuff, but to me, it was just like, oh, if you don't know the spec to a Cosmo, or you don't know how to make a Cosmo, or you can't change it around, then you were kind of useless. Probably Cosmo and Mojito. Probably Mojito would be like the real classic. But Cosmo would be the first modern classic where I'm just like, all right, that's the one. Maybe espresso martini. Maybe. I don't really remember making those early in my career. just because fresh espresso wasn't a thing back in 1994 behind bars, maybe in European bars. But in dive bars, I mean, like at 8, I mean, I remember working in bars where we started buying stemware, first time, just like stemware specifically for that drink and only that drink. Like, if you ordered a martini, you got it in a rocks glass. They didn't really give a shit. One is like the first one off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's interesting that you went there, and that which is like much later, I think, than a lot of bartenders. I think classic cocktails would go, to the old school, like the martinis or the Manhattans and things like that. But I love that you went Cosmo, because that was still, like when I started bartending in '99, that was a drink that was still being ordered, definitely on the tail end of its popularity, but it was still there and it was still being ordered. And I love what you're talking about. A drink has made it when there are then spin-off menus for it. Like the Moscow Mule has that, the Mojito has that, where there's whole menu. You're like, well, it's not even the drink anymore. Like you just you made it your whole thing, and you took part of the word. I mean, Libby had like the worst designed cocktail glass ever, called the Cosmopolitan glass, which was the stemless V-shaped martini. I mean, horrible, like literally the ugliest glass ever designed. But that was, for some reason, I remember probably going to the warehouse to pick up supplies for the bar. We carried those sons of bitches in 1999. That was the glass that we used. But I mean, that you're right. I mean, like, and what's a Cosmo at the end of the day? And we'll get into like some of the nitty gritty of what makes, why we think some of these cocktails have made it. But I mean, it's a daisy, I mean, it's just it's a sour, a modified sour. And you're right. It's really good. And it got so popular that it drew haters, which is like your specialty, I feel like, Giuseppe.
Yeah. You're right though. Like the second, I mean, you have a classic cocktail off the bat. If, one, you're being copied, and two, people are having arguments over what the proper way. I mean, like we still have this argument over the old fashioned, or like, what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, the old fashioned, is it whiskey? Is it this? What kind of sugar? I mean, like it muddled. I remember making old fashions and being yelled at because I didn't muddle orange and cherry in it. You know what I mean? Like that was like, and there were years where I'm like hesitant to do it. It's like, oh, it doesn't have muddled cherry. People are going to send it back, but like that, I mean, like, I guess there's no such thing as bad press, I guess is what I'm looking for, where it's like, oh, okay, well, if you have people that are critical of it, and they hate on it, eventually, you're kind of on the right path. People are emotionally invested, what I mean, whether it be positive or negative.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
There's feelings behind that. So
yeah, exactly.
It's going to affect you.
Yeah.
Yeah, drawing. I mean, having something having it talked about as opposed to it being completely obscure and dead. And I think you can stand behind that drink. It's not a fucking cement mixer, or something like ridiculous. It's a perfectly good drink. Like it's got it all going on. But the old fashioned thing is, I mean, talk about a drink that this is something that 200 years of history behind that basic combination, right, of spirit, sugar, waters, and bitters, and then well over 100 years of it being named, into the late 1800s. Like that's wild. And think about the iterations. A drink like that, it's evolved and it's changed in so many ways. Even in just the last 20 years of bartending, that has changed. Like you said, like when I learned to make a proper old fashioned, like a thoughtful old fashioned, it was the Dale DeGroff method, which I still enjoy, which was, we would cut the meat off of an orange and then discard the peel because to not be muddling with the pith. And it was a raw sugar cube and some Ango and good quality cherry. So we were doing the muddled style, but now it's become just that raw drink again. And like all the fruit salads left the playing field for most people, unless you go to Wisconsin, and you'll get run out of town if you do not bring a muddler. And if you have a nice cherry, you're probably also going to get run out of town. They want a fat maraschino cherry, like bright red, Shirley Temple, 7-year-old, at a wedding action going on. But,
and lots of Sprite.
And yes, and if you want it sweet, a little splash of Sprite or sour mix up there. And I mean, and they drink probably more old fashions than the rest of the states cumulatively, and that's I think that's not a stretch actually. But I think that's also a sign when it gets interpreted in so many different ways over the years. But it's interesting. It's taken bartenders and historians, guys like Dave Wondrich or something, to go back and give that drink its identity and at least start to find its actual history, which I think reels it in a little bit from all of the tangents that it went on over the years. At least gives it, so when guests ask, because when you teach an old fashioned to a cocktail enthusiast, like what do you show them? Do you show them the muddled fruit? Like, because if it's somebody's mom, dad, if they're like 40 plus, they're probably more familiar with that muddled old fashioned. That's the one they probably saw their parents enjoy. What you think? What do you teach your new bartenders, Giuseppe?
Lord, that's a loaded question. I mean, like, it sounds corny because all of us say it, you know what I mean? And even me and Fanny touched on it, you know, for the pre-show, where I'm just like, oh, you kind of have to have a good working basis of like classics. What that working basis is changes, you know, from place to place, country to country, you know, but like asking, you know, getting a young bartender, just like, oh, there are certain you just have to make, we have to see how you make them, you know what I mean? I have to see you, you know, are you shaking a martini? Are you not? You know what I mean? Are you not freaking, you know, fresh lime juice and something like a daiquiri, you know, like things like that, or just like, all right, or you start like, you know, you need a working basis that all of us can agree should be the standard. I hate using words like that because it makes me think in absolutes, you know, and I don't like thinking that way, but I'm just like, all right, like we all need to understand, you know what I mean? This is an old fashioned, or at least this is the this will not get sent back as an old fashioned, you know, or probably easier one would be a Negroni, you know, where I'm just like, oh, you know, if you're throwing in, let's say, citrus in your Negroni, I'm like, all right, there's an issue there. And that's basically like when I'm training bartenders, just like, what's the culture? What do we understand the classics to be? And let's work from there. You know, like wherever you learned, like I've been lucky enough to work in like, you know, for like very specific cocktail people. And I'll tell you, like, you know, for Joly, Audrey, and Sasha, and three of them have three different philosophies on what classics are. You know, they're very similar. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like, but the philosophies are different. The quality is still the same. Like, you know, it's still super high quality. You know what I mean? But like, you know, this is the spec for, you know, like the whiskey sour has three different specs in three different places. You know, so like, yeah. Like I never get too torn down with younger bartenders on like, you know, exactly like what the recipe is or what the spec is. Just more like, okay, you understand exactly what the purpose is, and then go from there. Yeah. You know, don't throw chartreuse into every drink, you know, you make because you love chartreuse, and then call it that classic, you know, call it something else. I don't really give a shit, but like, you know, let's all understand that, like, you know, this is this, and then you can go from there. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think like when you're mentioning Audrey, and like, obviously when you came up in New York, it's interesting because I think one of the things that makes today as well slightly less than it did 100 years ago or even 30 years ago, you know, before the world was so connected. Location helps. It's, you know, it's not I don't think it's a deal breaker. You know, if you're in Omaha, can you design the next, you know, modern classic? You can, but like people in major cities have a leg up because I think, you know, we were talking about this. When you look at the modern classics, especially that list, it's all, you know, bartenders from Milk and Honey, PDT, you know, it's all these iconic New York, first wave New York cocktail bars, because that's where the press was too. And accidental marketing, the press wasn't trying to hype up one cocktail and be like, we're going to make this the next hot cocktail. They just talked about it because they only had these, you know, half dozen bars at that time in the early days to talk to. And so they talked about the same bartenders, the same drinks, and they're getting that free advertising that was, you know, I think happened probably in the late 19th century too, to some extent. Like, hey, the bartender down at this hotel makes this fantastic new concoction that he's come up with. We got to get down there, and, you know, whatever you did, and I don't know, like jumped on a giant wheeled bicycle and put a derby on and fucking went to the hotel bar and did it up. But it was that word of mouth and that kind of that guerrilla marketing that also helps those cocktails. If people aren't talking about it and people aren't asking for it, it can't become a classic.
Yeah.
So being in major markets certainly helps, because then you look at the other ones as well. Like they pop up in a little bit in Chicago, a little bit in SF, in London, of course. But it's you just got to work a little hard. You got to hustle a little harder if you don't have that media in your back pocket that's talking about you. And I don't think it was an intentional thing, but I think it's worth mentioning though. That is certainly something that can help nudge one of those cocktails forward a little bit. You got to get that coverage. And I mean, obviously it's the ones today, 100 years later, think about it. It's the ones that repeatedly got captured and put into people's books. There's so much plagiarizing in cocktail books. Not saying that people were stealing other people's recipes, but you'll find multiple old cocktail books that are the exact same recipes, and somebody just put a new name on the book. There are unique ones.
You just defined stealing, though, Charles. You literally just defined stealing.
But they're not saying that,
okay, it's stealing, which is great.
They're not saying that they created the drink. They're just, but they plagiarize the book. They're not plagiarizing they're not claiming ownership of the cocktail.
Yeah.
Is the difference. But the fact that, like if it's in one book 100 years later, it's very unlikely that somebody's going to have to, excavate it. But if it's in 20 books 100 years later, then people are like, oh yeah, I've seen this drink a bunch of times. I'm going to try and make it. And it has way more potential of getting legs and catching on and becoming a classic.
Word.
I don't know. It's just a thought on that, because there were classics that were probably red hot in the early days as well that went dormant until the second golden age of the cocktail in the 2000s. That people pulled back out and dug up when they started, the Corpse Reviver. Like, who the hell was making a Corpse Reviver pre-2004? Like not many people. But people started to dig through those key books.
I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of two drinks that probably weren't popular when they were around and are more popular now. Probably the Last Word and Jungle Bird, off the top of my head. Where I'm just like, no one, when the Last Word was invented, I mean, if it wasn't for Murray Stenson out in Seattle, would we know that drink? They didn't even know it back then. I mean, that came out of Detroit. And then Jungle Bird, like finding the lineage on that drink. If it isn't for Jeff Barry writing a small little paragraph about this interesting drink that has Campari and pineapple, like back then, even in the 70s, no one was that still didn't have the power of, let's say, like a Tequila Sunrise, or like a Grasshopper. Whereas now, just like all bartenders revisit those drinks, we're just like, oh wow, you know what I mean? Like they were onto something, and you can pick up on it. And even though we use the term classic for them, like those are classic drinks. I'm just like, yeah, but they were around. They weren't that hot, you know what I mean? It was like, so it's just like the way the world is connected, the way we interpret, the way we can
Oh no.
Uh-oh. I'm gonna the way that it was interpreted, the way that the world was going at that time. I don't know what he was gonna say next. He'll pop back in from that freeze frame. You froze up there for a minute. Yeah, you're back.
There you are.
All right, is Charles here or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Okay, Charles is still okay. There's my guy. It's you. I was like, "There's no way I'm doing this alone. goddammit. No way."
You're good.
Can I ask you? So, like, I think you had your rules for what you think makes a contemporary classic. I think that those rules applied to the classics as well. So I don't know if you kind of want to go through those, because it's a nice bridge. And I think we talked about some other things that are not on that list necessarily, like where you're at when you made it, maybe who you have, working the bullhorn for you to get the word out. I'd love to hear your list, because I know they're very similar. And then I have a couple of other things that I'd like to ask about and maybe look at to see what makes up one of these cocktails.
All right. What, Joey's 5 rules? Wow, God damn it! My PowerPoint skills are exceptional. Let me preface this by saying that. Let me preface this by giving a story, and it's actually a good story, negative story, whatever the hell. I don't give a shit. But back when I used to drink, I would say about 7 years ago, there was a bartender, his name is Thomas Wall, invented a cocktail called the Velvet Underground. And it was basically a banana chip infused rum drink that was kind of like a White Russian. And it was one of the best fucking things I ever drank in my life. And as someone who's surrounded by cocktails, I very rarely feel the need to like ever freaking like go to someone's bar and be like, I need that drink, because I'm constantly being like, oh, what are you working on? Or vodka soda, please, whatever the hell, you know. But that day I went in. I think he was at Death & Co. at the time. Yep, he was at Death & Co. And I go there, and I'm sitting down, saying, "Yo, can I get a Velvet Underground?" And the bartender that's working has no idea what this drink is. Thomas had already left like 5-6 months ago. There's a new staff behind the bar. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, you know, how disappointing. One, I was disappointed that the drink wasn't available, but two, is just like no one else would get to try it. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, oh man, like, you know, like, there are certain bars that would never happen, you know, and those are to me the great bars, you know, those are like, well, not that that makes them all great bars, but, you know, like, I was just like, all right, but like when you create a cocktail, there should be a living legacy and record of it so that other bartenders can keep going. There's a reason why when you go to Pegu Club, even though it's not on the menu, you know what I mean? Old Cuban doesn't need to be on the menu anymore. You could always have that cocktail. You know, that's part of that bar's legacy. That's part of Audrey's legacy. They built that there. You know, other drinks, you know, like the Gold Rush, or if you go to Milk and Honey. So like when I created these rules, I was like, all right, bet. Like I want, you know, the one rule I have and how I say is just how you create a classic. Just like, you know, if it goes on the menu once, it's there forever. That's it. So where are my slides? Go to the next slide, please, Leah. So let me just put a disclaimer, because I always rub people the wrong way. Or just like,
What? No.
I always have to fucking say shit like this.
Joey? Who? Joey Skywalker? What? He never ruffles any feathers.
He's ruffling his internet's feathers is what's happening. It seems like these are not my personal rules, not the value judgment.
Oh my God.
Love it. All right. Well, Charles.
All right. These are not yet. So these are Giuseppe's rules. These do not in no way represent the internet at large, nor Portland Cocktail Week. Is he back with us?
Yes, I am. I can hear.
He's
Charles.
got that dial up still. He's real retro. He's that hipster.
I'm in Vegas, bro. I'm in Vegas, man. We're still counting.
He's over there, like in the wall.
I can see the slide.
Come on.
We can see you, and we can see your slide, and you're gone. Just kidding.
And he's gone. So he's going to talk about his rules here, and there are a couple things that I was thinking about that were not on Giuseppe's list to start.
Right.
And so, and we can ping him about it. All right,
you see me now?
Yeah, man, you got to turn off. You can't be playing your Xbox at the same time that we're on the Zoom call.
I'm a PS4 guy, but anyway, go to the next slide, please. Let's just keep moving while I still have internet. So, so the most important, one of the rules that really like rubs people the wrong way is when I say no infusions. And the problem with no infusions is just like, yeah, it's not that I'm saying that you can't be creative without infusions or you can't find new flavors. You know what I mean? I see a lot of bars always fuck with infusions, and like a lot of drinks. I've invented infusion drinks. The problem with an infusion drink is just like, you know, it makes it hard to be replicable. You know, so like if you really want to create a classic, there's a reason why the old fashioned has been around for 200 years. Every bar on the planet can make an old fashioned. Everybody at home, you know what I mean, with just 2-3 ingredients can make an old fashioned. You know, but if you're fucking around with a Thai basil chamomile, you know what I mean, gin, you know, that only works on that one drink, it's gonna be fucking delicious, I bet. But like, you know, you're not gonna have that reach. You know what I'm saying? And it also leaves it to, you know, like seasonality is tough. Like, you know, I see a lot of bars, you know what I mean, use seasonal ingredients and.
Yeah, so the seasonality is tough. So maybe leave the seasonal for that section of your menu, and maybe you've got your like standalone menu that's like, these drinks are always here. This is our core. This is what we're known for. You get these 12 months a year, but not using seasonal and infusions.
All right, am I here?
You're here.
All right, what the hell? Everybody's coming in and out. Is it just me? All right, so it wasn't me this time.
So seasonality, you were talking about seasonality. Maybe that's the reason why you have so much hate for pumpkin spice lattes, because it's like seasonal.
No, because it's mediocrity in the form of like creativity. But anyway, that's another fucking subject.
Okay, I have a question about the no infusions part, just because of and I'm assuming no infusions extends to no unique original ingredients, because you have the Trinidad Sour, which has orgeat, and orgeat has quite a few different like ways in which it can be created. Like, what did you come up with a standardized version like for that? Does that make sense?
Well, yes. When I invented the Trinidad, you know what I mean, there wasn't really a good bottling of orgeat. You basically got the stuff that was monin, that really didn't really taste like almonds. So I made my own orgeat, but I had already made orgeat for a drink I invented called the Infante, and I was just fucking around with like all the other stuff. And then I saw another classic drink. I saw another drink at a cocktail comp where I was just like, oh, this might work, you know, called the Trinidad Especial, invented by an Italian bartender. But like, I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, like that one, like that. I'm like, this doesn't taste like all the other shit I ever thought was orgeat before. And probably the easiest way for bartenders to really think about it is grenadine. You know, how many when we first started, we just like had our own recipe for grenadine because we couldn't find basically the red food dye coloring we were all used to thinking of as grenadine. Now, but like, you know, but orgeat, I think, is something that should be behind every bar, in particular, just like, you know, like one of the greatest drinks ever made, the Mai Tai calls for it. You know, it's not like, you know, just because it fell out of favor, you know, like it had purpose.
Yeah. You say he just dropped out again, but I think it's a great question. It's the Trinidad Sour, I think, is known in cocktail circles, but it hasn't broken out because of that. But like, I think also with this simple modification, and we'll talk about that, being able to substitute, that drink's a great example. You lose a lot by not having all the flavor added from the orgeat, but if you just pop simple in and you're making like, you know, an Anglo Sour with that, like, it's still delicious. It's missing some depth and it's missing a lot of those flavors, but it's still, you can get close. It's not, the whole drink it's not trash. It's just not as good. So I think you can play with it, which I think is a good sign of a drink that can stand. I was just saying, G, that like it's, if you needed to on a desert island and you only had simple syrup, like you would definitely lose some flavor, but not, you know, like I'm not going to kick it out of bed for eating crackers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Oh, Trinidad Sour is like one of those cocktails where I'm just like, yo, dude, like it's like Angostura is like Campari. It doesn't fucking play nice with anyone.
Yeah.
So you add a quarter ounce of it to any.
So while he's freezing, I have a true confession. Before I knew Giuseppe in any capacity, I made a version of a Trinidad Sour that had pumpkin seed orgeat and split base rye and pumpkin syrup that was made by Vapor Distillery. They don't exist anymore, but it was delicious, and I had no idea this man and his hatred for pumpkin at that time. But it was called the Squash Buckler. Very nice.
Oh, I like this. See,
that sounds yummy.
Yeah, that sounds great.
It was good. Probably hated
it. No, a pun name. I think that's one of the other things on my list as well that didn't like is not in G's first top 5 there. Like is like, you know, what's in that name? Like how important is the name? And I don't think it needs to be profound. I think some parts, like I've had a lot of bartenders that have worked with me that have been like, oh, the name's the hardest part. I'm like, the name's the most fun part. You know, like I think I keep a list on my phone, like in a little doc of names, you know, that will become a cocktail one day. I have no idea what will be in them. So I don't think you have to overthink it. Have fun with it. Make it memorable. Make it, you know, something people can pronounce is generally a good idea. You know, but I think there is something to it. It is, you know. I mean, people might end up naming a bar after it, right? Like where the Paper Plane just opened up someplace, like not just, but you know, relatively recently.
Yeah.
Wow, next rule. So know every ingredient, like seriously though. So when I have bartenders present things to me, and there are certain there are trigger words that fucking piss me off. Because they just demonstrate an ignorance on the ingredients you're working with. In particular, when I see, the one that comes off to the top of my head is Amaro. Where I'm just like, oh, it has this, and Amaro, and I'm thinking to myself, like, well, not all Amaros are the same. They're all, like, you know what I mean? Like, Montenegro has a vanilla custardy thing working, you know what I mean? Nonino, sarsaparilla, root beer, Fernet is Fernet, you know what I mean? Is it labeled in Amaro? So, like, if you're gonna throw something in there, know exactly what's in it. You know, when I see green chartreuse, in particular, you know, and I see the description and like yellow chartreuse, I'm just like, well, which one is it? You know what I mean? Yeah. Green chartreuse is basil, it's oregano, it's everything in the garden. Freaking yellow chartreuse is chamomile, honey, two different things, two different. And it's really just a test of bartenders to just like, all right, like really think through everything you're putting in your cocktail. Don't give people a lot of movement on just like on ingredients. Like you can swap out certain things, you know, like this is, you know, switching out a citrus is not the same as switching out a modifier, you know? So like if it calls for, you know, an orange liqueur, but that orange liqueur has to be freaking, you know, on the level of either a Curacao or something like Grand Marnier, then fucking say it. You know, or like, let me know. But if you think that there's movement there, and you just say orange liqueur, then I'm going to put whatever I want or whatever is going to help my cost effective or cheaper, you know, because we run businesses and we also need to think critically about our well placements.
Yeah.
So that's like the second rule I always tell bartenders. Next one, please. Oh yeah, be prepared. So like whenever people, like, I don't know, this is one of those things that I prepare younger bartenders for, or just like, I'll give you, for example, like if you if you present a drink in front of Audrey, you know, that shit needs to be ready. Like, don't fucking come in and be like, I'm still working on it. I try it with this, I try it with that. Trust me, she will fucking gladly tell you what you're missing and not missing. What she won't do is watch you experiment and fuck around and not have your shit ready and waste your time.
Yeah.
Because then it just demonstrates that you came into this idea not knowing clearly what you were trying to do, and you're hoping you get lucky, and you know what I mean. It becomes like one of those drinks. I've seen it happen so many times where a bartender has a certain idea and exactly what they want, and then they go vote by committee, and then all of a sudden you added an extra dash of bitters that wasn't supposed to be there. It gets a quarter ounce of simple to adjust the acidity. And then, you know what, like instead of fucking gin, why don't we put gin and scotch, you know? And then all of a sudden you have this Frankenstein fuck of a cocktail that nobody and I mean like, the last two rules, I give those to bartenders more just like personally, like, you know, you kind of personally need to be able to freaking like, you know, control yourself and start learning your ingredients. You know, like creating a classic or like, you know, working on new drinks is fun, but it's also work. You know what I mean? It's part of your school, your skill set. And the beautiful thing is like, you know, once you start working on it and you get that knowledge, no one can take it from you. It's yours. It's permanent. You know what I mean? You know what the differences are. You know what you can do with citrus. You know what recipe ranges you like. You know, like you can start stretching out your hands and being like, okay, I'm looking for something refreshing, but I also want a savory finish on it. This rule is probably the most important in terms of just like, I mean, like I love the word replicable. If you can't be copied and you're not letting everybody copy your drink, then you're fucked. Like it's never going to go anywhere. I've seen bartenders who, you know, they make great drinks. I won't say any names, you know what I mean? And they won't give me the spec for their drink. And I just blows my fucking mind.
Yeah.
Listen to me, man. Like I'm or woman, fucking, I'm trying to celebrate you. I'm trying to get people to drink your drink. You know, the fact that you think that like it somehow adds value, that they can only have it in front of you, prepared by you, and your ego so fucking huge that you can't fucking share that, or you can't let me adjust it or adapt it,
Mhm.
I mean, like you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
You know?
That's such a huge thing too. And I think I think it's definitely something that most new bartenders start off as, like, this is mine. I don't want to give it up. I made this thing and I'm very proud of it. But it, you know, and I was definitely that way too, but it was about many years ago. One of the chefs that I was working for said, like, Chef Voltaggio was like, I have books with all of my dishes available to people, and people buy this book and they do it, and it's fine because anybody should be able to be able to replicate it, and then it's something special when they get it from me.
Mm-hmm.
That adds the value there as well. Like, so give it up. Like, you want to share this with people. Only you can make it with that special something or other because it's your physical presence is there, but let that drink be able to shine. So it definitely took the food chef to teach me that part too.
And I think that's, to further like on that, I think bartenders are generally really good about it. It's something that I noticed when I first was making the transition into like full on cocktail style bartending, if you will. I'd already been bartending for many years before we knew what where we started. That we had no idea that this was all going to happen when we decided to open a little cocktail bar in Chicago. But you know, I saw that chefs were really tight with their recipes and like their secret ingredient or whatever. But the bartenders were all like much more open and sharing in terms of that, which I thought was cool. And it gets it out there as well, to establish the base story of that, because I mean, even take like the Cosmopolitan had such a contentious story, back and forth. And it's, luckily we had a lot of people talking about it while everyone involved is still alive. So, we could kind of get a more, a tighter story, where, Toby is credited with the creation of it, like in its given form. Dale is, somebody who really got it out there and helped popularize it and served probably a gazillion of them. I think that's super important. And I thought that, Giuseppe, you also touched on a point, and it's something that we had talked about when we were all chatting earlier, knowing your ingredients like that. For me, it's so important to, like, I don't know. I mean, experiment on your own as a young and budding bartender whenever you want. But like, I don't want to see your freestyle dance until like all the other dances, like blindfolded with on one foot. Mm-hmm. I want them to be flawless, like absolutely flawless, because then and you can kind of tell. You see that when you're talking about specific ingredients. If I'm judging a Manhattan competition, let's say, and you get a bunch of Manhattans that is sponsored by a whiskey company, and all the Manhattans that come in then have like Carpano in them as the vermouth, and it's just crushing. You can't taste any of the whiskey that's sponsoring the competition. That's great vermouth, but is it the right tool for the job, or have you just been told that by someone and didn't think it through on your own? Like, grab bottles, taste, know all of the tools in your toolbox inside and out. And for me, the line is not just knowing how to make cocktails. We can watch YouTube videos and learn how to do anything. I took my dryer apart during lockdown and rebuilt it with a YouTube video. I have no business opening up large appliances. It still works, but it's not the point. So I understood how to do it, but I don't know why anything works inside that machine. So but as a bartender, this is our career. So not just how to build the cocktails, not just the recipes, but why every ingredient does it. Why are we shaking it? Why are we stirring it? Why is this cocktail served up? Why is this one on crushed ice? Why am I using a different, Amaro? Like, because that's a huge one. That's not even subtle at all. Yeah. That's not calling for gin in a drink, which is a wildly broad category. But in Amaro, I mean, that's uber specific in terms of flavor profiles. That Amaro is like making your own house-made infusion with very specific flavors, but it's been done for you from companies. So yeah, I mean, I think I say, like, it really is that like old cliche of walking before you run. Like, you need to absolutely master that walk before you like get out and try to hustle new drinks that hope to stick.
One thing I want to say, just like, I know we're thinking in terms of just like the way modern classics, and we're thinking in terms of recipes. you know, and specific drinks. And for me, a lot of the modern classics, you know, and I also think in terms of techniques that are very identified to a certain bar. For example, like fat washing. You know, whenever I see a fat washing drink, doesn't matter what the fuck you fat wash with it. Coconut, bacon, fucking duck. I always think Don Lee. You know, I think the Benton's old fashioned. Whenever I see, you know what I mean, any kind of like beautiful vessel, like if I were to see, what's that vessel you have over at Aviary, Charles? The one, the porthole?
Porthole, yeah.
The porthole. You know what I mean? I've seen lots of bars buy that piece of equipment and make their own different drink, but I'm always thinking to myself like, oh, that's the porthole at Aviary. You know what I'm saying? It's just like that's not a cocktail. That's a technique. That's an instrument. Something where just like this is like you've given access to people like that. Like you can think broader in terms of like what a modern classic is. Like, you know, like you see the porthole in a cocktail. You know what I mean? I never think, oh, what's that? Like I still don't know what's actually in that cocktail. I don't know. I do know it's your drink. I do know that it's beautiful. I see other bartenders copy it. I see other people, you know what I mean, take that and move with it. You know, same with the Benton's Old Fashioned. Barrel aging would probably be another drink.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, where it's just like, okay, like, you know, you barrel age this. Yeah, I'm thinking either, you know, I'm thinking Morgenthaler, you know what I mean, or Castro, whoever fucking you want to give credit to that one too. They become part of that conversation.
Yeah, I think this is like a branch on the tree that shoots off. So you've got like modern classic cocktails, and then you've got a branch that we're talking about with modern classic techniques. Almost that happen. So they can spur cocktails. So like that porthole device that was designed at the Aviary, it was designed before I got there, so I take no credit for the design of it. It becomes a different cocktail all the time, and it is about the serve. Like I've got my smoking box that I designed with my barware, and like that becomes whatever people want to do with it. I mean, chefs are putting, you know, food in it and serving it, and now it becomes a technique that hits the table, which is cool. It's something that I don't know that it's happened for a long time, you know, like somebody like swizzled something, you know, many moons ago, and like I don't know if they thought like bartenders would be like trying to find some swizzle sticks, you know, hundreds of years later, because it was just the tool that they had. But yeah, you're absolutely right with fat washing and everything else. And I think it's cool to be able to trace the legacy back to the bars or bartenders that were influential in launching those. And I think we'll get on to talking about some of those techniques, which is cool. I mean, when Dale brought back flaming oranges, like that guy, like he literally could be credited with, he didn't invent it, like, but he, you know, he'll tell the story a million times. He'll be like, hey, look what happens when you do this. Like, I learned this technique. And his boss was like, yeah, do it on everything. He's like, oh shit, you know? And there's certainly those bartenders that were in that bridge era into the early 2000s saw that, picked it up, and people ran with it heavy in New York, you know? And it's something that I learned, and I did definitely, we flamed, you know, did it on all of our cocktails early on, not all of them, but, you know, we did it a lot.
3-4 times each drink to get it right.
No, man, I got very specific feelings about the flaming. No, you got to go easy on it. You got to go light. You don't want that oil slick on top of it. People sitting with the butane lighter, filling it up, and you could taste that on top of the cocktail. It's trash, Giuseppe.
Apology, bro. Apology. I can't. I'm on my phone because I got tired of losing internet connection on my laptop that I bought 12 years ago, and I refuse to pay a new one. I'm okay. So this is actually, we'll just fly through it because I want to go into what Charles was talking about, because I think we just touched upon it, where we take classics. Well, you'll see it. This is actually Charles fucking does some dope shit. Nothing should ever be brand specific. And this isn't a knock on any brand. If anything, it's the exact opposite. So let's say you invent a drink and you tell me it's only ever fucking good with this one brand, where I'm just like, oh, well, your drink sucks. You know, like you know, I work in a bar where I need to be able to move things around. You know what I mean? What my well placement is. So like if you say rye whiskey and it only is that one rye whiskey that is at 100, whatever the hell proof, or it has to be at 113 or it has to be at 80. So I'm just like, all right, then your drink is kind of trash.
I think you can have brand preferred though. Like your preferred brand, not like, you know, yeah, don't make it so like the drink, it collapses because it's so dependent on this one delicate, you know, ingredient that it's either that or nothing. It's not, which is great if you want that cocktail to only be made at your bar. But yes, to create a modern classic, you can have your brand choices. Like you said, if you want to use a specific curacao, like this is my preferred one to make it pop and get everything perfect. But if you don't have that, then you have curacao B, then like that fine, like, you know, or whatever it might be. So I think, yeah, you have your wish list, and then what people do with it, people are going to do what they do with it, you know?
I mean, one drink that comes to the top of my head, like, you know, is the penicillin, where it just like actually has 2 different kinds of spirits that are very specific. You know what I mean? Blended Scotch, Islay Scotch, you know, and it's really but I mean, I've seen people, you know what I mean? Like that kind of, you know, you can go single malt on, you know, on your base, and go maybe, you know, maybe a lowland, a delicate lowland. You know what I mean? There's ways you can go with that, but it's not brand specific. Where I'm like, you know, you can, or like, you know, like an espresso martini would probably be the most important one. Or just like if the espresso martini only worked with one vodka, you know, which we know isn't true. That's one of the reasons it's a classic. It's one of the reasons why that drink is so versatile. And it's not even an ego thing. It's because we deal with guests that are very specific about their brands. And being able to sub their brand in only helps you. You know what I mean? Like, you know, if I have a Kettle One drinker, you know, and they want to try, you know, I'm not even trying to plug Kettle One, even though I should be. I'm just like, I literally have 3 bottles right by my head right now. And it's like nothing I can think about. But like, you know, if you have a Kettle One drinker, you know what I mean, and you're working on, you know, let's say a porn star martini, that's an easy sub, you know, espresso martini. So like, that's basically why that rule is there, where it's just like, try it out with different things and see, you know, like make sure that like, you know, if it says vodka, you know what I mean, it works with all vodkas, and, you know, choose what you think is the best one. You know, that the best expression of that, I don't know, like how many times, which rye do you use, you know, for the Trinidad? And my answer is, I don't really give a shit, you know, like rye whiskey, you know, whatever is in your well. Canadian works well too, just rye whiskey, don't care. Bourbon works well too. What's the next one? Let's go to the next slide. Range. Okay, so we're down to the pre-last one. Range. This is something that's hard to explain to bartenders. And the easiest way I tell them is just like you build a recipe, and especially when I'm training younger bartenders, and they're so fixed on the fucking recipe that they need it to, like, there's no deviation. And the fucking thing about classic cocktails is that, like, you know, like you think old fashioned, there are hundreds of recipes for their old fashioned daiquiris, different kinds of recipes, you know, and that's because, like, you know, really there's a lot of leeway into like how much rum you need to add, how much lime you need to put in, how much simple, you know, and it still comes out tasting like a daiquiri. Is it a good daiquiri? That's really fucking up to interpretation. But the easiest one to think of is a Negroni. You know what I mean? When does a Negroni stop being a Negroni? You know, I've never seen a recipe for a Negroni that if you throw in those 3 ingredients in any way, shape, or form, doesn't taste like a Negroni. That drink has huge range, and it's usually always pretty good. Too much gin, it's fucking delicious. Too much Campari, it's fucking delicious. Served up, you want to know what? It's fucking delicious. Too much, you know what I mean? Like 2 orange wedges. You know, fuck the orange wedge.
I think like, what you're getting at, like, is like the drink needs to be a little bit forgiving in terms of its precision. Like when you're making it, and you're right, like the Negroni is awesome. Like it's tough to make a bad Negroni. Even like hotel ice, poured right into the glass and done this a little bit, like still pretty passable Negroni. It's delicious, very forgiving cocktail. This is something that we tell people, like when they send in recipes for competitions, for example. It's like where we're going to make them for them, like in a bar, you know, when the first round is not in person, but they're sending in recipes, and then we make all those recipes. We actually tell the bartenders, like, write down your recipe and don't say a word to whoever you're handing it to. Hand them that recipe, have them make it, and does it taste like what you intended it to taste like? Like, or else you've made a cocktail that's too finicky and it's not going to be replicated. You've left up too much to chance. And better yet, give it to somebody who's not even a bartender, you know, give it to your roommate or whatever, like it is, and be like, here, make this cocktail. Like, here's the tools, here's the booze. And like, what does it taste like? Is it that forgiving? Because you're right. Like if somebody comes in, then like, I heard this drink was great. like they make it at the bar down the street. Like, can I have one? This is the rest. And the bartender makes it and it's garbage because they slipped and poured in, a quarter ounce of absinthe and now that's all you taste. Or, it's a maraschino bomb or something like that, whatever it might be. So I think it serves you well to have a cocktail that's not that's not super finicky in terms. That's a little more forgiving on proportions, for sure.
Yep.
I think we're on the last slide. Where is it? Next one. I wish I fucking maybe ladies can help me. Like me and Charles were just like, we call it Mr. Potato Head. We're just like, yeah, you could. So
plug and play.
So let's say you go through this whole process and you fucking do something. Then all of a sudden I'm just like, I'm gonna fuck your day up and I'm gonna freaking switch out the spirit. So let's see. Okay, you made me a gin cocktail. I want to try it with scotch. Okay, it's pretty good. All right, let's try it with tequila. Let's see how that holds. Still pretty good. You know what I mean? And and this is just for personal enrichment, but 9 times out of 10, if you're able to follow all those things and you can switch out base spirits or even modifiers, you're in fucking pretty good ground. You know what I mean? Because what you're basically doing is giving bartenders and guests at home, the opportunity to fuck your shit up.
Yep.
And do whatever they need to do. Like in particular, like last word variations,
Ultima Palabra.
Last word. You can switch out last word on spirit. You can switch out, like modifier, chartreuse for something else. You know what I mean? But
then you stand to make a new modern classic by doing that too.
Yep.
Right? That's what are half of these cocktails anyways? They're all, who's made a truly original cocktail? Like very, 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 very few of them.
We're all building off the bones that were already left there for us.
Great. Yeah, fantastic. You know what I mean? Unless you build an entirely new instrument, you're not making new music. I don't know, something that hasn't been invented before.
So when I see like someone's drink, I'm just like, all right, I'm good. And especially when I taste something that's really good, I'm just like, the first thing that tops on my tongue is just like, I wonder what it would taste like if they put that in it, And then when you end up with like mezcal Negroni, I think is a classic. Even though all you did was sub out like mezcal for fucking gin, but it doesn't have its own name. No one can take credit for it. Every bartender thought about doing it. They sometimes, tequila drinkers prefer it. But it's like off the top of my head, I'm just like, It just shows you just how great the Negroni is. You know what I mean? Like how, why it's going to be around that long.
But that goes though back to some of those other things like the Oaxacan Old Fashioned. Phil, could they get credit for it, right? At MIOL, like for popularizing that rendition, which you're right, like the Old Fashioned is such a strong cocktail, you just with mezcal in there, and now you've got a Oaxacan Old Fashioned. But some of those other things, some of that hype and some of that accidental marketing, we're not marketing it per se, but that happens regardless by being in print or whatever, or just having enough people visit your bar from different places, especially like New York is such an international hub and even, for the States, like everyone, you end up in New York at some point throughout the course of the year when we're able to travel. And so you have a higher likelihood of bartenders from all over the country coming into your bar, checking it out, being like, oh, I had this there. Now it's got a name. And now it also has been attributed to some place and some time, which is like a rare gift that happened with that one that doesn't happen for most cocktails. You're right. Who's the first person to put, a mezcal into a Negroni and then have a call? Who cares? But you're right. It's the power of that cocktail. There's going to be a whole Negroni menu. Just everyone's going to have Negroni menus everywhere. It's going to be like the mojitos. They're going to screw it up, be muddling mint in your mint and raspberries in your Negronis.
That does sound good.
If we want to be I don't want to use the word pedantic, but I will use the word pedantic. The closer you can get your drink to looking like a template, the closer you are to becoming a classic. You know what I mean? When you're teaching whiskey sours, you know what I mean? Like I'm not teaching a bartender the recipe for the whiskey sour. I'm giving this is how we make all the sours. So you can switch out whatever the hell, you know what I mean? And coincidentally, you know what I mean? If you know the whiskey sours, then we can template the Daisy because they're very similar and you can go there and you can just if we make the Manhattan, then, this is if you know the template for the Manhattan, you can pretty much make all the Manhattan variations, and this is how you can just stack on recipes and ideas. If you can create a cocktail that as a template starts working like a template, then it's like, oh, okay, like, you know what I mean? Like it's very attractive for other bartenders because one, you get to learn less. It's easy to remember, and like, you know what I mean? You can grow from there, and then just like, all right, and you can repeat it. You know what I mean? 1,000 times a night, every night on Friday, Saturday, without having to fucking, like.
The recipe is easy to remember as well when you're trying to like think of that cocktail. I think there's probably a reason like a lot of the equal parts cocktails, even though most of them are garbage, when made equal parts, I said it and we'll say it again, there's a reason though, people grabbed onto it. They're easy to remember with the proportions, right? Like how much of everything goes into it. That said, once you know that, I say like, the finesse, then you can finesse it like once that drink's known and established and you're making it in your bar, then like finesse it however you want. Like, like if you want to leave that, make your Negroni and leave a little long pour in a gin because that's what you do, then like whatever, I mean, that's your finesse. Or if there's a specific spirit you want to use, then I think that's your finesse once you got once that cocktail's had its time to establish itself. If you look at so many of the modern classics that have hit, they're all just spin-offs of some other classic that also hit back then and then endured over time. And there's stuff that got real regional too. Like you were talking about the Porn Star Martini, which is like so regional, huge in Europe. The Gin Basil Smash, like that cocktail, it is hard. Like I didn't realize it, and I was shocked. I mean, it is like a Moscow Mule in Europe. It is so passé and been so done to the point of the way people drink mules here. It's like such a done cocktail over there that just absolutely took off. So I think there's some a little bit of regionality that happens with things as well. But I was kind of like, it made me think as we were talking about this. There's a difference between classic cocktails and known cocktails as well, because there are a lot of cocktails that are hot for a minute, but like I think the question then remains like, how do you make it hook and last for decades, and not just think about what people were drinking in the 70s. How much of that is still being made today? Like not a whole lot, maybe some spinoffs that happened, but they didn't grab. Think about how many drinks and cocktail books over the years that have just kind of gone by the wayside that somebody was making at some point and thought might catch. But so yeah.
I definitely like the replicable part of it, the Mr. Potato Heading it, and I think it's a good message to very excited bartenders who like insist on making 10 ingredient cocktails, that it's just not necessary to do that. Like shout out to all my bar babies at my last place. Like your limitation is 4 things, and that includes your garnish. Get it done, because everybody's done it better with just that. Nobody's trying to replicate the Singapore sling like 5,000 different ways. Like it's too much. It's not easy to do when you're like dying in the well on a Friday night. Sorry.
Yeah, there's a time and a place for it, Yeah. And if you have the type of bar that's what your stick is, that's great. But like what we're talking about here are classics, modern classics, right? Or classics. So it's like, that's cool. Like if your bar's vibe is to be super, culinary inspired and hyper seasonal and everything's house nice, that's amazing. But that's going to be like just like, and that's cool. And there's room in the scope of what the type of bars we have in the world for bars like that. And that's a beautiful thing. But the cool thing about a modern classic is that you can go to a neighborhood bar and be like, oh, like you spot a bottle of vermouth and be like, you can get a Manhattan, right? Or like you got, you might even like change that up, but like you can get, a Red Hook or whatever it is. Like you're like, oh, you see the ingredients. And because they're there and it's easy to explain, even if that bartender doesn't know how to make it, they can make it passively,
Definitely.
Cool.
I think I'm done.
That's
Charles, it's you now, baby. It's all you, Bobby.
No, that's great. No, this is a 4-person show here. So yeah, absolutely chime in. So I think it's how long are we going to?
If we have stuff to talk about, we can go.
Yeah, cool. I think like this, the only place that we wanted to take this real quickly was also looking at, for those that, it's kind of maybe a nice segue to this, for those that want to push further than the modern classic and aren't too worried about it, taking those cocktails that have become templates and then doing simple tweaks and using some of these ideas to move them forward into making them kind of like occasion-based served, because I think drinks have the potential for becoming known that way as well. Be like, all right, this takes a little bit extra, but this is for, New Year's. We're gonna, you're having your tight circle over or whatever. We're gonna make this one drink that's gonna be our signature, and so we kind of make some tweaks there. So I think we got some recipe slides, and these are just examples that I grabbed from some stuff that we did with Kettle for the Emmys last year, or this past year, a few months ago, and it's like, take the martini, right? How many different ways has that gone? And that's actually the porthole that was the infusion device. But the base of it is just a martini. Like the cocktail is just that. It's a Bianco Vermouth Kettle One martini, and then it gets that rapid infusion. And so the serve is the thing that takes it up a level. You have a very basic cocktail, nothing that is revolutionary, something that's familiar in that way, and then you take some interesting ingredients, build it around it, and an interesting serve to build on that template of the classic. So I think we got a couple other ones here we can take a peek at real quickly. The espresso martini, again, like this is Dick Bradsell. He's amazing bartender who's now unfortunately passed, but he's got the Bramble under his belt. He's got the espresso martini under his belt. He was banging them out like back in the early days of the cocktail over in the UK. And so this, I love that the espresso martini came back. Like, I think it's delicious, and there's like points in the night when I'm out and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I want like a little, like, I just want a little like oomph. I want a little pickup when it's done well. I think it's a really delicious drink. And so we did this again, the 4-ingredient drink, including the bitters on this. And the only house made, we'd made a cold brew using stout, using Guinness to make cold brew coffee instead of using water to brew it. We did it with it, and it bridges really nicely. So simple step, but it gives it that interesting read and interesting flavor. That will grab the customer's attention when they're reading the menu, when they check it out. What else we got in there? These are just some Moscow Mule variations. Again, super easy. Like, again, this is kind of the Mr. Potato Head theory that Giuseppe was talking about. All right, we can bounce on to that next one and talk about the serve. Yeah, roll up to this next slide here. So this is one, like a vodka soda like riff, essentially, or like it's somewhere between a vodka soda and a vodka Collins. It looks like a vodka soda, and so it takes even your most basic your drinker that's just like go straight ahead and they're not sure what they're drinking and that's their go-to. Made it clear specifically for that light, refreshing, effervescent look. By using like a little bit of citric acid solution instead of lemon. But like when we put this recipe out for the event, we also then for the press gave them the fresh sour version. And then you've got a vodka sour tall, like and the infusion is easy to make because you can literally go to any grocery store and get a chamomile lavender tea bag and just toss it in your simple syrup. And so it's very forgiving as well. Like, are people going to be making these or talking about it 50 years from now? No, it's not going to become a modern classic, but again, spin-off inspired by and keeping it classic.
Do real quick, Charles, because like I agree and disagree with you. It's just like once again, like when we come just like what becomes like modern classic, like I'm looking at your 3 drinks and just like there's so many techniques there where I'm just like, oh wow, like this is actually helpful. Like in particular, like the Guinness cold brew. You know what I mean? Me, it's just like, oh wow, like that's something I feel like could help a bartender do. There are like 4 different things I would think I'm thinking about right now. Just like, oh shit, like Guinness cold brew. Oh wow, I wonder what that would taste like if I did this. You know what I mean? With like Earl Grey tea, or like if I made a cold brew using something else. Like a lot of the stuff that you have there. You know what I mean? Like you took a modern classic and then you created a technique to reinterpret the modern classic. And that to me, like the technique to me is where like you know, like what's the muse? The modern classic was the muse for the technique in modern day that we can use to apply to create new modern classics, or like, you know, new techniques behind the bar, which you never know is going to be like citric acid, like, you know, like with the highball, just throwing citric acid in there, just like, all right, bet, like, you know, a lot of bars but can, you know, or do modify their citrus to get fixed citric acid. Mm-hmm. And that's, to me, eventually is going to be a standard. Or, you know what I'm saying? Am I rambling? Like,
no, not at all.
Right, like, you know, I'm just like, you know, like, I don't think of the new modern classics as being recipes, as more like techniques. Where just like, all right, now time it's just like, all right, well, you know what I mean? Like, this so and so did this technique here. Let's try applying that. Mm-hmm. You know, like that to me is like the next step. That's the evolution. You know, just like, what new techniques are we going to come up to create? Because, you know, like, I hate saying it, you know what I mean? Has every drink been made? We're pretty fucking close, you know what I mean? Like, I'm the old guy, so maybe I'm wrong, but like, we're getting close to that. But have we invented every technique that we can throw behind a bar? No. Like, you know, that's the next step. And that's where you're at. That's
the combinations of spirits unmodified have been done in so many ways. Yes, there's very little left on the table in terms of combining spirits with no other modification to them. No, again, not even a syrup that's got a little something to it, or anything else. Yeah, it's tough. It's not, and that happened very quickly, right? As like quickly as the early 2000s. You know, one side note that popped in my head too. I was just thinking, like, they take a guy like Sam Ross, so who's been so successful, like 2 super strong modern classics, and with the penicillin and paper plane. The other thing, like one thing that I feel like he did as well, he was doing a lot of consulting, and he was and then, you know, those would show up on every menu, you know, so it's like getting it out there. Like, I've done that with cocktails I've had, and I had somebody push back and be like, "You've done this cocktail before." Like, yeah, I have. Like, and if only one person ever made the Manhattan and only put it on one menu, then no one would have known about it. I'm like, it's a good drink, you know. I didn't just copy paste a menu from somebody else and give it to you. Like, I didn't, but like, yes, like these couple drinks are kind of signatures that I would like to people to know about. You know, I'm proud of that. I want to put them out there, and they're easy to make, and they have a good margin for you, and all of these things that make a modern classic a desirable thing to have on your menu. For those reasons, they're also bartender friendly and guest friendly in terms of enjoying.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the Irish coffee that is a classic, right? And then Giuseppe goes and does the Duke of Suffolk and uses gin, and it's incredible. It's one of my favorite drinks of all time.
It's my favorite out of all my children. It's my favorite. So
I miss it. You need to come back and make it for me.
I'll give you the recipe. You'll kill it. I'm in the people don't get cold here anymore, man. Shit.
Fair.
You still get cold. It's just you're cold when it's like 75 degrees out. You're like, oh, I need a cardigan.
It's actually 60 degrees, and I was, what the fuck is this shit?
I mean, it'll get colder in the nighttime because you're in the desert, so there's like a diurnal shift, I believe. So it does get cold there.
For like I'll be
Everybody
fine.
Look up the recipe for Duke of Suffolk, and let's get that in the lexicon to bang out.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right.
Do we? All right, cool. Yeah, we can look at this real quick. This was just kind of looking at. This was from the aviary. Again, I take no credit for this technique, but it's a technique that I saw catch on. So this is a hollow ice sphere that they developed, and the cocktail's injected into it, and then you break it. Like 6 years ago, I went into a bar in not in Warsaw, in Krakow, Poland, and tiny bar on a tiny square. And I'm doing a presentation. The bartender's like, "Hey, coming back. I want to show you this thing I've been working on." Opens up his freezer, and he had been making these ice spheres in the only way he could, you know, in balloons, and freezing them one at a time. And he had like, you know, he took this technique that he saw online and worked on it. And he's like, you know, I get about 3 or 4 of them to work a day, you know, because he didn't have all the equipment to make them and whatnot. And I was like, that's amazing. I can't believe somebody on the other side of the planet is going through all this work, saw this, and is now trying to replicate it. And since then, if you look up in the rocks, or, you know, if you Google search it, you'll see dozens and dozens of places all over that are now using this technique. And I think that's amazing that they took the ball and kind of ran with it. And I think it's cool because you can always trace it back in the lineage as a serve that was developed at a specific bar at the Aviary in Chicago, but now it's going to take on a life of its own. And I think that's a great I don't know, it's just great homage, right? Like when somebody starts covering your music, like that's great. Like it means they care enough, they liked it enough to try it on their own, which I think is pretty dope. All in all, and that cocktail change, like you were saying before, Giuseppe, like that cocktail is not always like every 6 months or so. What's in the rocks changed, and the mix of it would actually change, but the technique would hang around.
I mean, we struggle so hard. One of the most important things about bartending, or at least cocktail bartending, is trying to create an experience for your guests that's memorable. And you're always trying to leave an imprint, and and you need to extend it. You want it to be a positive imprint. You want it to be something where it's like, oh wow, like that one place, that one person, made that for me. You know what I mean? That's tough because just like as things become more saturated, more competitive, being creative gets tougher. And creating that imprint gets tougher. And that's also
then people have to rely on being actually good bartenders that can talk to people.
Yeah, and I think that's it's your decision when you open your bar. Like, what is your bar? And like, it's totally fine. I think we've seen that trend. Like, it's cool you can have just 10 classics on your menu and that be your jam, and that's cool. Like, I respect that. Like, kill them, do them like really well. That's great. And if your vibe is like everything is original, like cool. Like if your vibe is everything was harvested within 3 blocks of your bar, awesome. Like whatever it is, don't feel like you need to chase all of the trends. Like pick what you want to be and then do it. And I think there's an endless. There may be we may be closing in on the limits of how many ways we can combine all the bottles behind our bar without doing any other modifications. But like the way you present yourself, the way you express yourself, and the way you host, and the way you do all these other things, I think that's everybody's one of one. So like that's like you have control over that and that unique experience. And so like own that. Make sure your cocktails are amazing. Like sure, like you're selling liquid in a glass. Make sure that liquid in a glass is fucking great. But then like own the experience and like what people are really paying for, because they can drink at home. Like they're choosing to be with you, or choosing to support your bar now if they're coming by to get your cocktails to go, or whatever it might be that you need to do right now to make it through. There's a reason they're coming by to buy your cocktails to go, not because they love your cocktail so much. It's because they love you and they love your bar and they want to support it. So that's a sign that you're doing some of those things right.
Absolutely. Do you guys happen to know any or recommend a few books that can revive some of these classic cocktails into modern cocktails that people can read?
Oh man, manuscripts of old cocktail. Are there one or two you remember? Oh man, I think one of the ones that was most successful in the second golden age of the cocktail that we're in the midst of was the Savoy. Like so many cocktails came up out of that. I think that obviously Wondrich did an amazing job with the Bon Vivant's Companion, and so many of the core classics that were revived came back from there, like Dale with the Whiskey Smash, when he hooked that back in and repopularized it heavily. Like that's in the original like bartender book, 1862, like that's the first printed bartender manual. So I don't know. I mean, maybe you dig up that one cocktail that only got printed in that one book in that one obscure bar from back in the day and revive it. Who knows? But for modern ones though, I mean, try and get your stuff out there, like get it online. Even if it's in people's blog posts or whatever, like maybe you have maybe you get included in somebody's books. A lot more people when they're writing cocktail books are now bringing in recipes from lots of different people as opposed to doing all just their recipes. So it starts to create the legacy for those drinks. I think get them on menus. That's the first step. Like, like one thing that we did back in the drawing room days, my first cocktail bar, 07, when my bartender created a cocktail, we put their name underneath it. And we're like, this was because I was the beverage director, but I'm like, this is not this is not my show only. Like all these other people around me are doing this, and I could feel like if the press want to do an interview, I'm talking to them. But I'm like, hey, all these other bartenders are contributing as well. I want to make sure credit was given where it was due. And I always like that. I mean, I would like to be credited for my work. I know.
Yeah, it's like a team effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we get any other questions pop through that we can?
Well,
I'm pretty sure I know who it came from, but someone just poking the bear and asking for how to use pumpkin spice creatively in cocktails. I don't know. It wasn't who I thought it was.
Yeah. I think you mostly just smear it all over your body before you start your shift, and you're good to go.
Yeah, perfect.
And you just emit it.
It's a cancer in our industry, goddammit. Stop doing it. That's all.
Woo!
well, before I start closing in on everything, will you guys let the public know where they can find you on Instagram or social media, Facebook? Share your handles.
Giuseppe Gonzalez on Instagram. Freaking Giuseppe Gonzalez on Facebook.
Easy as that.
I'm not going to as a friend on Facebook just because I don't want to do that anymore. So I just ignore the friend requests. But and I kind of love Instagram. I wish I was cool enough to start a TikTok, because I feel like TikTok is like where happiness lives. Like everybody's so happy doing positive shit there.
I think you should do a TikTok with your jump roping skills.
Dude,
yes.
I talked the other day and I was just looking at all the rednecks on TikTok and I'm like, these people are amazing. Like there was a guy who like freaking was making a pastelaya. Like, have you seen this one?
No.
We'll watch it after we get off this class. We'll all hook back up online and watch this TikTok.
There's a cave guy. There's a guy that lives in a fucking cave, and he starts off every sip just like, "Can you make a spear?" "Yes, I can." And then he grabs like a dead animal and he makes a spear. It's like, "Hey,
no.
Can I make a tomahawk?" "Yes, I can." "Can I start fire using, this twig and water?" "Yes, I can." And I'm like, oh my god, like. I want to be that guy. Like Instagram, I'm just stealing people's memes and talking shit.
On the next episode of Join Us for Tangents with Giuseppe, tune in. We need a show on Vice. Just
videos are the best. Anyway, I'm
just talk smack, and I just I just drink. I sit and drink, and you talk smack. I think that's if we can monetize this somehow. I'm in with this entire crew.
Love it. Well, I think that's going to be it for us today. No more questions other than, again, poking the bear. So Thank you both so much for being here with us today, Giuseppe and Charles. I'll let Fanny take us out.
Yeah, thank you everyone for taking the time out to join us for another Monday of Marvelousness. Thanks so much, Charles and Giuseppe, for showing us how to make marvelicious modern classics. Thank you, Amy, Kettle One, Another Round, Another Rally, and Portland Cocktail Week. If you want to see more Marvelous Monday classes like this one, follow Portland Cocktail Week on Facebook, right here, I think. We have new classes on weekdays and an archive of past classes on the video tab here. And we're posting these videos on YouTube as well for folks who aren't on Facebook. We're also on Instagram, so you can find out what's going to be coming up next there. So tune in next Monday because we're going to have Tanya Clark balance us with moderation and meditation through the world of Kettle One Marvelous Mondays. We will see y'all same time, same marvelous day, because you know why. This is the way. Toodle.
I'm showing off.